Whitefish Station gave me a list of just 4 rules when I started. 1. After 11:19 p.m., don't go to Platform 3. 2. Don't validate tickets for non-existent trains. 3. Don't talk to staff wearing 1982 uniforms. 4. Never acknowledge the existence of train. 4:47. Last night I broke all 4. Now there are 47 new employees at the station, and none of them appear during the day shift. My name is Robert Hayes, and I've been working the night shift at Whitefish Station in Montana for exactly 1 week. The job pays $28 an hour, which in a town like Whitefish is enough to live comfortably. After 2 years of unemployment following the sawmill closure, I wasn't in a position to question strange rules or odd warnings. Whitefish Station is one of those grand old railroad depots from the early 1900s, built when the Great Northern Railway was king of the northern routes. 3 stories of brick and limestone, with high-arched windows and ornate ironwork that speaks to an era when train travel was glamorous. Now it's mostly Amtrak's Empire Builder, stopping twice a day, plus some freight traffic that rumbles through without stopping. The station manager, Frank Morrison, hired me on a Tuesday afternoon. He was a thin man in his 60s with nervous hands that never stopped moving, adjusting his tie, tapping his pen, straightening papers that were already straight. "The night shift is straightforward," he'd said, showing me around the eerily quiet station. "Monitor the platforms, assist any late passengers, keep the station secure. The Empire Builder comes through at 9:47 p.m. westbound, 11:58 p.m. eastbound. After that, it's just you until the 5:45 a.m. freight check. Seems simple enough." "It is." He paused at the door to the employee break room, keys jangling. "There are some guidelines specific to the night shift. Historical quirks of an old building, you understand?" He handed me a laminated card, the edges worn from handling. 4 rules, typed on what looked like an ancient typewriter. Night shift protocols. Whitefish Station 1. After 11:19 p.m., do not access Platform 3-2. Do not validate tickets for non-scheduled trains. 3. Do not interact with staff wearing 1982 issue uniforms. 4. Never acknowledge the existence of Train 447. "What's Train 447? I asked. Carl's hands stilled for the first time since I'd met him. "There is no Train 447. That's the point of Rule 4. "But if it doesn't exist, why have a rule about—" "Mr. Hayes," Carl interrupted, his voice sharp. "The previous night agent, Thomas Brennan, lasted 3 months. The one before him made it 6 weeks. The record is held by Janet Wu at 8 months. They all left because they couldn't follow simple rules. What happened to them? Nothing happened to them. They just left. Suddenly, usually without collecting their final paycheck." He handed me a heavy ring of keys. "These open everything except the old baggage storage on the 3rd floor. That's been sealed since the renovation in '91. My first few nights were perfectly normal. The westbound Empire Builder arrived on time, discharged a handful of passengers, picked up a few more. The eastbound was occasionally late, but nothing unusual. I spent the long hours between trains reading, doing maintenance checks, and walking the platforms. The station at night had an eerie quality. The waiting room, with its vaulted ceiling and wooden benches, echoed with every footstep. The old ticket windows, now mostly automated, stood dark and empty. Platform 3, unused since the 1980s according to Carl, stretched along the north side of the building, its track rusted and overgrown with weeds. It was on my 7th night that everything changed. November 15th. I noted the date because it stuck in my mind for some reason. The westbound Empire Builder had come and gone. I was doing my 10:30 p.m. platform check when I noticed something odd in the logbook. The station had maintained handwritten logs since 1910, massive ledgers that filled an entire bookshelf in the office. The current log was nearly full, and I'd been glancing through older volumes during quiet periods. The entry for November 15th, 1982, caught my eye. 2347, train 447 arrived. Platform 3, 47 passengers plus crew. Mechanical difficulties reported. Awaiting departure clearance. The next entry was dated November 16th, 1982, but in different handwriting, 00:00. Previous entry error. No train 447. Platform 3 closed for maintenance, then nothing else that night. The next regular entry was the morning shift at 6 a.m. I was studying this oddity when I heard it, the distant blast of a train horn. I checked my watch, 11:17 p.m. The eastbound Empire Builder wasn't due for another 40 minutes. The horn sounded again, closer, then the rumble of an approaching train, the screech of brakes. I went to the north-facing window and looked out. Platform 3 was illuminated, not by the modern LED lights installed in 2010, but by older, yellow-tinted sodium lamps that shouldn't exist anymore. And pulling alongside the platform was a train, but not any train I recognized. The locomotive was a GM EMDF-7, a model I recognized from Train Enthusiast magazines. They'd been retired from passenger service in the early 1980s. The cars behind it were Bud Company streamliners in Northern Pacific Railway livery, dark green with yellow stripes. Northern Pacific had merged with Burlington Northern in 1970. This train shouldn't exist. At exactly 11:19 p.m., it came to a complete stop at Platform 3. Through the station windows, I watched passengers disembark. Men in suits and fedoras, women in dresses that screamed early 1980s, children in their Sunday best. All of them moved with an odd, jerky quality, like film running at the wrong speed. Then I saw the crew, conductor, brakeman, engineer, all in Northern Pacific uniforms. The conductor turned toward the station, and I recognized his face from the memorial plaque in the employee break room. Frank Morrison, Carl's older brother, killed in a train derailment on November 15th, 1982, along with 46 passengers and crew. There had never been a train 447 because train 447 had never officially arrived. It had derailed 17 miles outside of Whitefish in a snowstorm at approximately 11:19 p.m. The investigation blamed ice on the tracks and excessive speed, but here it was, 41 years later to the day, sitting at Platform 3. I should have stayed inside, should have followed the rules, but I had to understand what I was seeing. I walked to the platform access door, the one that led to the abandoned Platform 3. It should have been locked, had been locked every night I'd checked, but the handle turned easily. The cold hit me immediately, not normal November cold, but something deeper, older. My breath came out in clouds so thick they looked like steam. The platform was covered in snow that hadn't been there moments before. The passengers stood in neat lines, patient, unmoving. As I stepped onto the platform, they all turned to look at me simultaneously. "Evening, sir," said Frank Morrison, tipping his conductor's cap. His voice sounded like it was coming through water. "Running a bit late tonight. 41 years to be exact. This isn't possible. A lot of aren't possible," Frank replied. "Doesn't stop them from happening. You the new night agent?" I nodded, unable to speak. "Good. We've been waiting for someone to process our arrival. The last fellow, Thomas, he ran off before finishing the paperwork." Frank pulled out a clipboard that materialized from nowhere. "Need you to log us in. Train 447 arrived 11:19 p.m., Platform 3. 47 souls aboard. I can't. The rules say... The rules, Frank laughed. The rules were written by people who didn't want to deal with us. But we're here, Mr. Hayes. We arrive every night at 11:19. We wait. We can't leave until someone properly logs our arrival. Why can't you leave? Frank's expression grew sad. Because we never arrived. Officially, the derailment happened before we reached the station. In the records, Train 447 never made it to Whitefish. But we did make it. We're here. We've been here every night for... One of the passengers, a young woman holding a sleeping child, stepped forward. Please, sir. We just want to go home. We've been traveling for so long. I looked at the child in her arms. Pale. Too pale, with frost in its hair. If I log you in, I said carefully. What happens? We can finally disembark properly, Frank said. Move on to where we're supposed to be. The platform is our prison, Mr. Hayes. We're stuck between departure and arrival, between life and whatever comes after. I thought about Rule 4. Never acknowledge the existence of Train 447. I'm sorry, I said, backing away. I can't. Frank's face darkened. Can't or won't? The rules. Damn the rules. His shout echoed across the empty platform. Several windows in the train shattered, revealing dark, empty interiors. We followed all the rules, speed limits, signal protocols, safety regulations, still ended up frozen in a ditch 17 miles from here. The passengers began moving toward me, their jerky movements becoming more pronounced. Some of them flickered like bad television reception. Others left no footprints in the snow. I ran. Behind me, I heard Frank shout, "You can't run from us forever, Hayes. We're here every night. Every night at 11:19. I'm back inside and slammed the door. Through the window, I watched Platform 3. The train was already fading, becoming translucent. The passengers stood in their lines, staring at the station. Then, like someone turning off a light, they vanished. Platform 3 was dark and empty again, covered in undisturbed gravel, no sign of snow. I sat in the office, hands shaking, trying to process what I'd seen. The logbook lay open in front of me. I flipped to November 15th, 1982 again. But now there was something different. In fresh ink, in handwriting that wasn't mine. 23:19. Train 447 requests permission to depart. Still waiting. My phone buzzed with a text from Carl. Did you go to Platform 3? Before I could respond, another text. Thomas said he saw the lights on. Please tell me you didn't go out there. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. I saw them, I said. Carl was silent for a long moment. Then, come to my house. Now. Leave the station. I can't leave my shift. The hell with the shift. Get out of there before they come back. Come back. But they left. They always 11:47. But if you've acknowledged them, if you've seen them face to face, they'll come back. And next time, they won't just stand there. I grabbed my coat and headed for the door. As I passed the window overlooking Platform 3, I stopped. There were footprints in the gravel, dozens of them. And they led from the platform to the station building. To the door I'd just locked. I drove through empty Whitefish streets at nearly midnight, my hands still shaking on the steering wheel. Carl's house was a modest 2-story on the edge of town, every window blazing with light. He met me at the door before I could knock. Get inside, he said, pulling me in by the arm. His living room was cluttered with papers, old photographs, and what looked like decades of railroad documentation. Your brother, I started. Frank. Yes. Carl poured himself whiskey with trembling hands. He was the conductor on Train 447, November 15th, 1982. They told us it was ice on the tracks, but... He trailed off, staring into his glass. But what? But the temperature that night never dropped below freezing. I checked every weather report for 100 miles. No ice, no snow, not until after the crash. He showed me a folder thick with newspaper clippings, weather data, investigation reports. The official story never made sense. 47 people died 17 miles from here, but when the recovery crews arrived the next morning, they could only find 46 bodies. Who was missing? A passenger named Peter Kelvin, businessman from Seattle. His ticket was punched, his luggage was on the train, but his body was never found. The investigators assumed he was thrown clear, maybe consumed by wildlife. Carl laughed bitterly. Wildlife doesn't usually take just one body and leave the rest. What do you think happened? Carl pulled out an old ledger, similar to the ones at the station. I found this in Frank's effects. He kept his own private log. Look at the last entry. November 15th, 1982, 2300. Passenger in car 3, compartment B acting strangely. P. Kelvin. Claims we've passed Whitefish 3 times already, insisting we stop the train. We'll notify security at next station, 30 minutes before the crash, Carl said. Frank was worried about this passenger, and then he flipped to a loose page, tucked in the back. The writing was different, shaky. They're here every night. Platform 3. Can't leave, won't leave. Not until someone lets us complete the journey. The passenger did something. The passenger changed everything. Find the passenger. When did Frank write this? I asked. That's the thing, Carl said. I found this page in the ledger 3 years ago. The ink was fresh. 40 years after Frank died, and the ink was still wet. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Return to the station. We need to talk. FM. Carl saw my face pale. They're texting you? How is that possible? Same way they appear every night. Same way Frank writes in ledgers. The boundary between their world and ours is thin at Platform 3. Has been since the crash. Carl stood, pacing. There's something else. Every night agent who's seen them, who's broken Rule 4, they start getting sick. Sick how? Cold. They can't get warm. Thomas, the agent before you, core body temperature dropped 3 degrees in his last week. Doctors couldn't explain it. He said he felt like he was freezing from the inside out. I realized I was shivering, despite Carl's warm living room. It gets worse, Carl continued. Janet Wu, the one who lasted 8 months, she started seeing them during the day. Not at the station, but everywhere. The grocery store, her apartment, walking down the street. They were following her, asking her to log them in, to complete their journey. What happened to her? She moved to Florida, said the cold followed her. Last I heard, she was in psychiatric care. Said the passengers wouldn't leave her alone. Another text. We're still waiting, Mr. Hayes. Platform 3. Every night. Forever if necessary. Don't respond, Carl warned. Any interaction makes the connection stronger. Why didn't you warn me properly? Why just give me vague rules? Carl looked ashamed. Would you have taken the job if I told you the truth? That my dead brother and 46 other souls haunt Platform 3? That they're stuck in an endless loop, arriving every night at the exact moment they should have died? So you just let people walk into this blind. The station needs a night agent. The town depends on that rail connection. And most people, if they follow the rules, never see anything. It's only the curious ones, the ones who dig into the history, who make contact, or the ones who accidentally see them because nobody properly explained the danger, I said bitterly. Carl had no response to that. I stayed at his house until dawn, going through his research. The more I learned, the worse it got. There had been other incidents over the years. A janitor in 1987 who who'd reported seeing passengers in the waiting room after midnight, a security guard in 1995 who'd found wet footprints leading from Platform 3 to the station interior, despite no rain, a teenager in 2003 who'd broken into the station at night on a dare and was found the next morning on Platform 3, hypothermic and delirious, claiming they wanted him to come with them. "There's a pattern," I said, studying the dates. "They appear most strongly on the anniversary, November 15th, but also on the 15th of each month, though weaker, and certain people can see them more easily than others," Carl added. "People with connections to the railroad, people who've lost someone in accidents, people who are already close to death themselves. I don't fit any of those categories." Carl looked at me strangely. "Your last name is Hayes. Any relation to Richard Hayes?" "My grandfather. He worked for Northern Pacific back in the day. He was supposed to be on that train," Carl said quietly. "Train 447. He had a ticket but missed it. Flu. He used to say the flu saved his life." The revelation hit me like cold water. My grandfather had talked about his railroad days, but never mentioned this near miss. "That's why they responded to you so strongly," Carl said. "You're connected to their story, a loose thread from 1982. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text, but a photo. Platform 3, taken from inside the train. Through the window, I could see myself in the station, watching them. But in the photo, I wasn't alone. My grandfather stood beside me, young, healthy, wearing a Northern Pacific uniform. "That's not possible," I whispered, showing Carl. "This photo, I was alone. The past and present blur at Platform 3, Carl said. "What should have been, and what is. Your grandfather should have been on that train, in some version of reality. Maybe he was." I needed air. I stepped onto Carl's porch, dawn light creeping over the mountains. That's when I saw them. Not at the station, but on Carl Street, the 47 passengers of train 447, standing in neat rows on the sidewalk, all facing the house. Frank Morrison stood at the front. He tipped his hat when he saw me. "We can wait, Mr. Hayes," he called out, his voice carrying on the cold morning air. "We've been waiting 41 years. What's a little longer?" Then they faded like morning mist, leaving only footprints in the frost. I turned to Carl. "What happens if I log them in? If I acknowledge train 447 officially?" "I don't know. Nobody's ever done it. Maybe it's time someone did." Carl grabbed my arm. "You don't understand. They're not just trapped souls looking for peace. Something else is keeping them here. Something that happened on that train before the crash. The missing passenger, Peter Kelvin. I think he's still on the train," Carl said. "I think he's been on Platform 3 every night for 41 years, hiding among the others, and I think he's the reason they can't leave." That night I returned to the station despite Carl's protests. I had to face this. The westbound Empire Builder came and went. I watched the clock approach 11:19 with mounting dread. At 11:17, the familiar sound of the horn. At 11:18, the rumble of approach. At 11:19 exactly, train 447 pulled into Platform 3. This time, I was ready. I had the logbook, a pen, and my grandfather's railroad pocket watch that my mother had given me years ago. I walked to Platform 3. The passengers were arranged as before, but this time I studied their faces. 46 familiar souls, all waiting patiently. "Where's the 47th? I asked Frank. His expression darkened. "What do you mean? 47 people were on the train. Where's Peter Kelvin?" The temperature dropped so fast my next breath came out as ice. The passengers all turned to look at something behind me. A man stepped out of the shadows of the platform. Tall, thin, wearing a business suit that looked both 40 years old and brand new. His face was wrong, too angular, too pale, like someone had tried to draw a human face from memory and gotten the proportions slightly off. "Mr. Hayes," Peter Kelvin said, his voice like grinding steel. "You shouldn't have come back. You're not a passenger," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You're what caused the crash." Kelvin smiled, revealing too many teeth. I needed a way to travel. The train provided accommodation. Unfortunately, the conductor noticed irregularities. He was going to stop at Whitefish, alert authorities. I couldn't allow that. "So you derailed it?" "I stopped it from officially arriving. These souls are my camouflage now, Mr. Hayes. Every night we pull into platform 3, and every night we fail to properly arrive. They can't leave because I won't let them. They're bound to me." Frank Morrison stepped forward. "41 years we've been your prisoners, and 41 more if necessary," Kelvin replied. "Unless Mr. Hayes here wants to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Kelvin pulled out a contract, the paper ancient and new simultaneously. "Log us in. Complete our arrival. But list only 46 souls. Leave me off the manifest. If I do that, they go free. The train completes its journey. The haunting ends. And you? I remain. Unrecorded. Free to take the next train, and the next, and the next." I looked at Frank Morrison, at the 46 trapped souls who'd been waiting 4 decades for peace. Then I looked at the thing wearing Peter Kelvin's face. I made my choice. I looked at the contract in Kelvin's hand, then at Frank Morrison's desperate eyes, then back at the thing that wore a human face, but was anything but human. "No," I said simply. Kelvin's expression didn't change, but the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Ice began forming on the platform lights. "No, no deal. You don't get to go free. Then they remain trapped forever," and gestured to the 46 souls. "Is your moral righteousness worth their eternal suffering?" I pulled out the station logbook and my pen. "Frank, what was Train 447's original manifest? The real one? From 1982? Frank's eyes widened with understanding. "Northern Pacific Railway, Train 447, November 15th, 1982. 46 passengers, 5 crew, 51 souls total." 51, I repeated, writing in the log. "Not 47, Kelvin snarled. "You can't." "I'm not logging in 47 souls," I continued writing. "I'm logging in 51. The original manifest. The true count, including the 5 crew members who aren't here, because they were in the locomotive that separated during the crash." "They're not here," Kelvin roared. "You can't log in people who aren't present. But they were on the train. They were part of Train 447. I kept writing, and according to railroad protocol, if a train arrives incomplete, we log the discrepancy and note partial arrival, crew missing, presumed lost. The platform began to shake. The ghostly train flickered like a dying fluorescent bulb. Kelvin's human disguise started slipping, revealing something underneath that hurt to look at directly. Angles that shouldn't exist. Colors that had no names. "You're not supposed to be here," I said to Kelvin as I finished the log entry. "You were never supposed to be on this train. You're not a passenger. You're not crew. You're an anomaly." Frank Morrison stepped forward, and for the first time in 41 years, he looked solid, real. "That's right. You're not listed anywhere. Not on our manifest, not in our records. You don't belong here." The other passengers began to move, surrounding Kelvin. They looked more substantial now, less ghostly. The mother with the child, the businessmen, the elderly couple, all of them forming a circle around the thing that had trapped them. "We know what you are now," Frank said. "You feed on incomplete journeys, on souls that can't reach their destination. You caused the crash to create your own feeding ground. Kelvin's form was deteriorating, the human shape falling away like old paint. You need me. Without me, you can't. Without you, we can finally leave, Frank interrupted. He turned to me. Mr. Hayes, please add one more thing to that log. Note that there was one unauthorized individual aboard, a stowaway. I wrote it down. Note, one unauthorized person attempting to board. No ticket, no identification, denied passage. The effect was immediate. Kelvin let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream. It was more like reality tearing. His form collapsed inward, becoming smaller, denser, until he was just a dark spot on the platform. Then even that faded. The moment Kelvin vanished, the train changed. The ghostly, translucent quality disappeared. It looked solid, real, but also somehow more peaceful. The passengers' faces, which had been twisted in confusion and pain for 4 decades, relaxed. Thank you, Frank Morrison said, and for the first time, he was smiling. We can go now. Where? I asked. Where we were always meant to go, just 41 years late. One by one, the passengers began boarding the train again. But this time, they were saying goodbye. The mother with the child waved. The elderly couple nodded gratefully. As they boarded, they became light, literally transforming into soft, warm light that filled the train cars. Frank was the last to board. He turned back to me. Your grandfather, Richard Hayes, tell him Frank Morrison says thank you. If he'd been on this train, Kelvin would have had one more soul to feed on. His illness saved him, but it also saved us. Without his absence, we might never have been freed. How does his absence? Kelvin needed specific numbers for his ritual. When your grandfather didn't board, it threw off the count. That's why Kelvin could only trap 47 of us instead of consuming us entirely. Richard's empty seat was our salvation. Frank tipped his conductor's cap one last time and stepped aboard. All aboard for the final destination, he called out, and it sounded like joy. The train began to move, but not on the physical tracks. It rose slightly, becoming more luminous, and then simply faded away like morning mist. The last thing I saw was the number on the locomotive, 447, glowing like a star before disappearing completely. Platform 3 was empty. Not abandoned empty, but peacefully empty. The oppressive cold was gone. The overhead lights, the real, modern LED lights, flickered on automatically. I looked at the logbook. My entry was there, but below it, in Frank Morrison's handwriting, November 15th, 2023, 11:47 p.m. Train 447 completed journey. All souls accounted for. Track cleared for future service. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, FM conductor. I closed the logbook and walked back into the station. The clock showed 11:58. The eastbound Empire Builder would arrive any moment. A normal train with living passengers on a regular schedule. As I prepared for its arrival, I noticed something on the bulletin board in the employee break room. The memorial plaque for the victims of the 1982 derailment had changed. Where it once listed 47 names, it now showed 51, including the 5 crew members who'd been in the separated locomotive. And at the bottom, a new line. Journey completed. November 15th, 2023. Carl was waiting for me when my shift ended at 6 a.m. The temperature readings at platform 3, he said, showing me his phone. They normalized at 11:47 last night. First time in 41 years. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, tears streaming down his face when I described Frank's final departure. He's at peace now, Carl asked. They all are. And Kelvin? Gone. Truly gone. He had no legitimate claim to be here. Once we officially denied him passage, he had no power. Carl nodded slowly. What about the rules? Do we still need them? I thought about it. Keep rules 1 through 3. But rule 4, train 447 doesn't exist anymore. It finally reached its destination. That was 6 months ago. I still work the night shift at Whitefish Station. The pay is good, the work is quiet, and platform 3 is just an unused platform now. Sometimes, on cold nights, I think I hear a distant train horn at 11:19, but it's not threatening or sad. It sounds like a greeting from old friends, letting me know they're okay. Last week, I received a letter. No postmark, no return address. Inside was a single train ticket, dated November 15th, 1982, from Whitefish to Seattle. It was unused, pristine, the name on it. Richard Hayes, my grandfather's unused ticket, somehow returned after 41 years. I called him that night. He's 93 now, living in a retirement home in Spokane. Grandpa, do you remember train 447? There was a long pause. How do you know about that? I work at Whitefish Station, night shift. I was supposed to be on that train, he said quietly. Had the worst flu of my life. Couldn't even get out of bed. My supervisor was furious, said I was letting down Northern Pacific. When we heard about the crash, his voice broke. 47 people died because of ice that shouldn't have been there. 51, Grandpa. 51 people were on that train. No, the reports all said. The reports were wrong, but it's been corrected now. They all made it to their destination, just took a long detour. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, Frank Morrison was my friend. We started at Northern Pacific the same year. He wanted me to tell you thank you. Your empty seat saved them all. I could hear my grandfather crying across the miles. Is this real? Are you really telling me this? It's real, Grandpa. Frank Morrison says thank you. They all do. We talked for 2 more hours. He told me stories about his railroad days, about Frank, about the night he was too sick to travel, and how he'd carried guilt for surviving when so many hadn't. It wasn't your fault, Grandpa. Your absence was part of the solution. I've had nightmares for 40 years, he said. Dreams where I'm on platform 3, waiting for a train that never comes. It came, Grandpa. It finally came. And now it's gone where it was supposed to go. 2 nights later, my grandfather called me during my shift. Robert, I had the strangest dream. Frank was there. He looked young, like he did in '82. He said, all debts are paid, Richard. Rest easy. Then I woke up, and for the first time in 41 years, I wasn't cold. It wasn't a dream, Grandpa. I know, he said softly. I know. I still work at Whitefish Station. New night agents get 3 rules now instead of 4. Sometimes they ask about Platform 3, why it's never used despite being in good condition. Historical reasons, I tell them. But don't worry about it. Nothing happens there anymore. And it's true. Platform 3 is quiet now. The only ghosts are memories, and memories can't hurt anyone. But every November 15th, at exactly 11:19 p.m., I stand on Platform 3 with the logbook. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because for 1 minute each year, I can feel them. All 51 souls, somewhere far away, but somehow still connected to this place. They're at peace, wherever they are. And in the logbook, the same message appears each year, in Frank Morrison's handwriting. Journey complete. All passengers arrived safely. Thank you for waiting. FM. The train doesn't come to Platform 3 anymore. It doesn't need to. It finally reached its destination. 3 years have passed since that night. I'm now the station manager at Whitefish, having taken over when Carl retired. Platform 3 has been renovated and will reopen next year for a new commuter service. When the contractors were working on the platform, they found something buried under the concrete. A metal box, sealed since 1982. Inside were personal effects from Train 447's passengers. Wallets, watches, jewelry, all perfectly preserved. We returned them to the families. Many cried. Some said they'd had dreams recently, where their lost loved ones told them to expect a package. But the most remarkable discovery was at the bottom of the box, a conductor's log, different from the official ones. It was Frank Morrison's personal journal. The last entry, dated November 15th, 2023, 41 years after his death, read, "The railroad teaches you about destinations. Some are planned, some are unexpected, and some take longer than they should. But every journey ends somewhere, thanks to a good man who chose to see us, who chose to help us, who chose to stand against the thing that trapped us. We finally pulled into our last station. To anyone who reads this, Platform 3 is clear. The tracks are safe. The thing that fed on incomplete journeys is gone. Use the platform well. Remember those who traveled before. And always, always check the manifest. Frank Morrison, conductor, Northern Pacific Railway." Finally at rest, the journal is now in the Whitefish Railroad Museum. To it is my grandfather's unused ticket and a photo from 1982. Frank Morrison and Richard Hayes, young men in railroad uniforms, standing on Platform 3. My grandfather passed away last month at 96. His last words to me were, "Tell Frank I'll see him at the next station." I think he will. Platform 3 opens for regular service next month. The first train scheduled to use it. Number 447. The railroad company says it's a coincidence, just the next number in the sequence. But I know better. Some journeys take longer than others, but they all reach their destination eventually. Even if it takes 41 years, even if it takes a miracle, even if it takes someone willing to stand up to the darkness and say, "No, they deserve better." Train 447 finally completed its journey. And Platform 3 is just a platform now. That's all it ever should have been.